So part of why I focused on these working families, people who are working and working and working some more, and it's still not enough, is simply, well, just to show the empirical reality that this is what's happening for millions of people, and also to show the lie of the myth of meritocracy, the lie of upward mobility if you just work hard enough and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I think it's important to just torpedo that myth.
Hi, I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. You can work full-time, follow all the rules, and still have nowhere to live. Brian Goldstone is joining us to discuss the rise of the working homeless in America. As a journalist and anthropologist, Brian followed the stories of families in Atlanta who are struggling with the American housing system. Today, we'll explore why homelessness is no longer a fringe issue, why it's so often hidden, and what it will take to make housing a human right. We also talk a lot about Brian's new book, There Is No Place for Us, Working and Homeless in America. I hope you enjoy the conversation. This podcast is brought to you by TELUS Smart Home Security. Secure, simplify, and easily monitor your home from anywhere using the Smart Home Security app. Visit TELUS.com/smarthome-security to learn more about Canada's most trusted security provider. Hi, Brian. It's so good to see you.
It's wonderful to be with you.
So you have a brand new book. Your book is called There Is No Place for Us, Working and Homeless in America. This could say working and homeless in Canada also. This book is, it's devastating to read this book. And thank you for writing it. I think it's such an important book. Why did you want to write this?
Well, thank you for saying that. It was, if it was devastating to read it, it was also pretty devastating to report it. The genesis for the book actually came from my wife, Elaine, who is a nurse practitioner. Around 2018, here in Atlanta, where we live, she was working at a community health center called Mercy Care, and she started to notice this trend among her patients. One patient after another, they were packing boxes for Amazon in a warehouse. They were working at McDonald's or Walmart. They were driving for Uber or Lyft, or they were in caregiving positions like daycare workers, home health aides. And when they finished their shifts, they told my wife they weren't going to an apartment. They were going to shelters if there were any shelter beds available, and often there weren't. They were sleeping in sometimes the very cars they had just done airport runs in their Uber and Lyft in. They were sleeping in the overcrowded apartments of others. And in one case, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Atlanta in recent years has become known as Yollywood because of how huge the film production industry has sort of burgeoned here in Georgia. And one of her patients was actually working on a film set and then sleeping in a tent. So she started to notice this trend. And when she told me about it, I was stunned. As a reporter, I had been doing work on economic inequality and justice all around the world for years. But I'd never seen sort of the link between work and homelessness explicitly discussed. And in fact, one of the classic books on homelessness, Peter Rossi's Down and Out in America, he actually formulates it as those who are homeless are unconnected to the world of work. So that was, I think, the dominant assumption that I had as well. And when my wife told me about this, I was stunned. It led me to first write a magazine article for the New Republic about one family here in Atlanta. And then when that was done, I realized I had only scratched the surface of really what this scandal, this term working homeless, was and continues to be.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it is stunning. Things are really expensive, and we hear people say that all the time, right? Oh, it's so expensive. It's expensive to rent. It's impossible to buy something. Everything's expensive. We're not talking these families, if you will, that you spoke to. You focused on 5, right? 5 in the book, and these are working people. These are not people who are, what's the word I'm looking for? They're contributing to society. They're trying to get ahead. It's impossible to get ahead. Why is it so impossible?
Yeah, well, exactly. And it's like not only are they contributing to society, not only are they not on the fringes of society, as I think we often think of people experiencing homelessness, they are paradoxically and really perversely, they are the ones who are actually building our economy. They are the ones in cities like Atlanta and really cities across the US and I imagine in Canada as well, who are who are producing through their work, through their labor, the very success and revitalization that so many of us as residents of cities enjoy. All of the amenities, the green space, all the great restaurants, they're the ones who make all of this possible. And so, you know, it's not just the fact that they're being pushed out of the neighborhoods they grew up in and being priced out of their cities. Increasingly, they're being pushed out of housing altogether. And yeah, and that speaks to just the impossibility. There's an impossible sort of arithmetic, a kind of brutal arithmetic at play here. And it's that what people are earning in their jobs simply has not kept pace with the outrageous cost of living, specifically the cost of housing.
Exactly. And this is what I was just talking to somebody about this the other day where, everything is so much more expensive now. Okay. So I go to the grocery store, I buy, a bag of groceries, and all of a sudden it's $80 and there's no meat in there. It's just stuff to feed my family. That's a lot of money. Prices have not come. I don't know if I'm right about this. This is just how it feels to me. During the pandemic, it feels like things came to a halt. Things got more expensive. There was all this supply issue. Well, nothing has corrected itself since. Everything is still expensive, if not more expensive. There's more people out of work. Never mind the people who are working. The people who are working these jobs that you just talked about, they didn't get a raise. Caregivers never got a raise. No, hospital workers never got a raise. They didn't, but everything's more expensive. How are we supposed to? You're talking to 5 families who are working and they are homeless. You must come across people who think that this just can't be true.
All the time. I mean, when I have told friends and family and colleagues over the years, what I'm writing about, this sort of rise of the working homeless, the response tends to be something like, okay, well, sure, there might be one or two unhoused people here or there who have jobs, but surely the majority of those who are homeless are there for, and we can just sort of fill in the blank with all of the kind of stereotypes of they're either refusing to work, they're lazy, they've made bad choices, they have been struck, as in kind of like a Greek tragedy, with some debilitating illness or addiction, and so that tends to be the response. And when I tell people that no, the people I'm writing about in this book are not some marginal phenomenon, that I mean, one study here in the US showed that just among those who are unsheltered on the street, roughly 40% are employed in the formal economy, have like get a paycheck, every couple of weeks or every month, to say nothing of informal work. That's 40% among unsheltered folks. Among families and individuals who are in shelters, it's about 50% have low-wage jobs. And then there's this entire world of homelessness that we're not seeing, that is out of sight. And, that's really what my book is about in many ways. I argue that the tents on the street, the makeshift dwellings under overpasses and on the sidewalk, these are just the tip of the iceberg. And so in many ways, my book is about this vast iceberg that's under the water surface that we're not seeing, that is invisible, or more precisely, has been rendered invisible, has been made invisible. And among that world, in that world, among that population, we're talking closer to like 90% have full-time jobs, if not more than one. And so this is truly a staggering crisis, a staggering phenomenon. And I think that we have ignored it or refused to look at it for very particular reasons.
Mm. Okay, let's talk about Brit, for example. So Brit is in your book, and Brit works full time at an airport restaurant. So, I mean, how many of us go in and out of airports and we don't think twice about the person who is helping us or behind the till because we're in a hurry, we're in a rush? Well, meanwhile, you might be looking at somebody like Brit who's working full time, has children, and she's sleeping on a pull-out couch with her kids in her great grandmother's apartment.
That's right. And when we meet Britt in the book for the first time, so she is working at a restaurant at the airport, at the Atlanta airport, which is the pride and joy of Atlanta's economy. It's the busiest airport in the world. And Britt is working at a restaurant. Her mom, Cass, is actually mopping floors at that same airport. She's working the graveyard shift. And let's just make one note about Cass. Cass, she does not work for the airport itself. She works for a third-party contractor who refuses to give Cass more than 29 hours a week of work because at 30 hours, she would be eligible for basic benefits like healthcare and sick leave. And so she only gets 29 hours a week. That's Britt's mom. Britt, you know, through Britt herself, just through her own story, you could sort of tell the entire history of housing policy in the United States because Britt actually grew up in public housing in Atlanta. Atlanta was the first city in America to build public housing during the 1930s, during the Depression. And during the 90s and 2000s, Atlanta was the first city in America to begin demolishing all of its public housing in favor of this kind of public-private model where the government is just trying to incentivize private landlords to house people by giving them rental vouchers. So when the book opens, Britt, she is determined to make a home for herself and her children in the city of her birth, in the city where, her roots go back 5 generations. And she knows the only way she's going to be able to do that is if she can win the lottery. And I think we should just emphasize the fact that this most precious human necessity, a place to live, that the word lottery is even used in relation to it, because only 1 in 4 families, low-income families in this country who meet all of the requirements for housing assistance actually are able to receive it. Just 1 in 4. So they have a lottery to decide who's going to be eligible, who's going to receive it. And Britt, when the book opens, she's won the lottery. She's getting off the waiting list. And then when she actually gets the housing voucher, she can't find a single landlord who will accept it. And the voucher expires. And the reason is because Atlanta, over the last decade or so, like many cities, across the world and across the United States, has experienced this much celebrated renaissance, a transformation of its urban center. And the cost of that is that, rental units are increasingly competitive. You have 4 or 5 families competing for one single apartment. And so landlords have no financial incentive to take vouchers because it prevents them from being able to jack up rents as much as they want. They have to pass basic safety standards and habitability requirements. And so Britt's voucher expires. And the year her voucher expires, just here in Atlanta alone, about 1,600 vouchers were issued to families and 1,100 expired before they could be used. So she realizes at that point, her hope of remaining housed, of putting a roof over her children's head, again, in the city that she grew up in the city whose economy she is powering through her work at this airport, that it is becoming untenable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, of course, there's people who would say, well, she should just get a better job, Brian.
Yeah, there are people who have said to Britt specifically, yeah, why don't you get a better job? Or why don't you move somewhere else? Move somewhere cheaper. And, to the move somewhere else question, move somewhere more affordable. One statistic that blew me away when I was in the process of reporting this book is that right now in the United States, there is not a single city or municipality where someone working full time at the local minimum wage can afford just a modest 2-bedroom apartment. Nowhere in the entire country. And for many years, cities like Atlanta were precisely the places where people fled to when they couldn't afford New York or San Francisco or LA. Atlanta was supposed to be that affordable elsewhere. And so not only is it the case that there is no more affordable elsewhere in this country, or that they're becoming just vanishingly rare and almost non-existent, but that I think a question that Britt has struggled with a lot is like, why should I move? This is my home. I grew up here. This is as much my city as anyone's. And to the question of getting a better job, I mean, when we talk about the sort of staggering rise of the working homeless and of homelessness, period, it's not just this growing chasm between wages and housing costs. It's also the nature of work itself. It's jobs like Britt's mom, the one that she has, where it's not just the wages are low, it's that the work itself has become ever more volatile, precarious, insecure. And that is true across vast segments of our economy today. The gigification of whole sectors of the labor economy has really meant that even if you can earn a few dollars more per hour, the work itself remains insecure. You still will likely not have sick leave if you get sick. And one woman in the book, Celeste, when she's diagnosed with ovarian and breast cancer, she's having to decide, do I go to my warehouse job or do I go to my chemo treatment, my chemo appointment? Because if I go to my chemo appointment, I don't go to work. And if I don't get work, I don't get paid because I don't have sick leave. So she makes a little bit more money per hour than Britt does, but she too has been pushed into homelessness because of this brutal structural injustice that has made having a job no guarantee that you will be able to afford housing.
But the jobs we're talking about, when I think about Britt's mom, right? Getting 29 hours, 1 hour away, 1 hour a week away from receiving basic benefits. First of all, that's cruel. It's beyond cruel. It should be illegal. But isn't this how, the rich get richer, right? Like we're seeing, the global wealth, basically get, cornered in on very few people who then have people like Britt and Britt's mom working for them, who are homeless, who can't afford to live somewhere with their children, who are working 29 hours a week, not getting that benefit for basic, whatever. And I mean, like, how does this movie end? I mean, the way that I'm looking at it, it ends very poorly for everybody except for that top percent that is getting richer off of our labor.
Something's got to give, right? I mean, something has got to give. My hope is that when readers sit down with this book and follow these families on their multi-year journeys, and not just one family, but 5 families, and see, this isn't just a bizarre anomaly. This isn't just some weird aberration, what this one family is going through, that this is just consistent across the board, and not just for these 5 families, but to put a number on it, right now, just in this country, in the US, about 12 million households are right on the precipice of homelessness. And by cobbling together different data sources, I show that, and this is a conservative estimate, around 4 million US households are currently experiencing homelessness. When we look at that scale and we follow these families in their journeys, my hope is that readers will begin to ask, as you just did, how is this supposed to end? Like, what is the end game here, right? Because the story that we have told ourselves as a society, the story we have been inculcated into, is that if you just work hard enough, right? If you just clock enough hours, if you just budget accordingly, if you just do what you're supposed to do, okay, you might not strike it rich, but you'll at least have this modicum of stability. And and these families, their stories, they just explode. They explode that myth. They explode that story we've told ourselves. And and they really force us to confront, I think, a different question, which is in whose interests is all of this whose interests are being served by all of this suffering, by all of this precarity.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about 5 million different things. The one thing that keeps coming up for me is shame, right? There's shame in not being able to, or we're taught to feel shame if you can't provide for your family. Where you should feel shame if you're not working, if you can't work, if you're sick, um, if you're not able to, juggle all the things you need to juggle as a parent. There's so many things that we're taught to feel shame about, or the worst thing that could possibly happen is you're homeless. Well, so here's these people who are working full time and they are homeless. So you should not feel shame for any of those things because they're doing that. But of course, there is shame that you're sleeping in your car or in a motel or on your pull-out couch of your great grandmother, right?
Yeah. There's a long tradition going back to Victorian England of dividing, of distinguishing between the deserving poor and the so-called undeserving poor. And the deserving poor were those who were trying, who were able-bodied as was, as they put it, and they were doing everything they could. They were working and it wasn't enough, and so they need some extra help. And the undeserving poor, they were the idle, they were the able-bodied who refused to work and so forth. And it's such a pernicious distinction, and I think a kind of lazy and reductive engagement with this book would say, okay, finally we found the deserving homeless. We found the homeless who we can have sympathy for, who we can have compassion for. They're not the ones addicted to drugs on the street and refusing to work and all of that. It's a pernicious distinction, and it's lazy. It's a lazy engagement with this book because, well, first of all, just the basic fact that the line between the hidden homeless, the invisible homeless, and those who are on the is incredibly porous. You can be in your car, sleeping in your car, couch surfing, in a budget hotel today, and 6 months from now, because of a sudden job loss, or because your car got towed, or because your kids got taken away, then you're in a tent on the street and you're drinking, you're using drugs to cope with the acute anxiety, the depression. And then we mistake cause for effect. We see the symptom of this insecurity manifesting in drinking, in addiction and other things, in psychic distress. And we say that's what must have caused them to be homeless, not seeing it instead as a consequence of being homeless. But so part of why I focused on these working families, people who are working and working and working some more, and it's still not enough, is simply, well, just to show the empirical reality that this is what's happening for millions of people, and also to show the lie of the myth of meritocracy, the lie of upward mobility if you just work hard enough and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I think it's important to just torpedo that myth so that we can finally just confront the reality, going back to what you were saying a moment ago, the reality of what we as a society have created. And let's talk about shame. Let's talk about the shame we put on these families as a way, I would argue, of avoiding this shame that would come immediately to the surface if we turn the lens around on ourselves, if we turn the lens around and say, how has our way of life, how has our comfort been made possible? I know I'm rambling on, but there's this Toni Morrison quote that from a commencement speech she gave in the 1980s. And she says to these graduating college students, she says, imagine, envision if our fun, our gratification, our enjoyment was not predicated on the deprivation of an other. And that is the kind of shame that emerges once we confront the reality of homelessness in all of its severity, and when we look seriously at its root causes. It's that kind of shame.
Yes, yes, exactly. Okay, I am gosh, there's so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about. It's because I do feel like this book could have been written about Vancouver. It could have been written about Toronto. It could have been written about anywhere in Canada, and I know anywhere in the US also. Um, One of the things we like to do is thank our guests for being here by asking them to choose a Canadian registered charity of their choice. You chose the Canadian Centre for Housing Rights. Thank you so much. Um, we will give them a donation in your name as a thank you for you being here, Brian. So thank you for that. I mean, like I said, there's so many things that we could talk about. But as we're wrapping up, I think it's really important to mention, um, that people who use shelters, people who use assistance of any kind, and this goes for Canada too, are, those families, those parents, they're constantly being monitored. They're being monitored left, right, and center by people. Never mind at work when they're working. They're being monitored there too. But they're being monitored in their personal life too, right? Like, are they looking after what do you mean you live with your kids in a motel? Really? Well, we're gonna come by and have a look, and we need you to report here, and you need to show up here at this time, and you need to da 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 da. This is a massive problem.
Yeah, it is. It is. And again, I mean, that kind of surveilling, that kind of overbearing, what are they doing now? What are they doing with their money? If I give them a little bit of money, what are they going to spend it on? What are they spending these state resources on? Why aren't we asking those questions about where are our taxes going? Where are the profits that build these incredibly these mammoth corporations? Where are those profits going? Why aren't those profits coming down to the workers who make those profits possible? But instead, we spend all of our energy surveilling the poor, surveilling those who have the least, and again, I think that's just part of it. It's a defense mechanism, I think, as a society to avoid asking really difficult questions. Um,
But we're looking for these families, the working homeless, if you will, because that's what we're talking about here. You make one tiny infraction. Oh yeah, well, now you've got big problems, don't you? You're in trouble now, aren't you? And it's ridiculous to me when it's we're punishing we're punishing the people who are holding up our society, like truly holding up our society, the working homeless. And if there are millions in the US, there are millions here in Canada too, for sure. There's no doubt about it. And if somebody thinks that this isn't true, it is true. And the system is broken, and we know it's broken. But is it broken? It's broken for the working homeless. It's not broken for their bosses, really, is it?
it's working just fine for them. It's working exactly as designed for them. You know, I really, really appreciate just the counterintuitive nature of what you just said, that these people, that these families who would be classified as working and homeless are actually the ones who are making everything possible. And there's something very counterintuitive about that. There's something kind of scandalous about the very term working homeless. Like, how is it that in these incredibly wealthy nations, incredibly wealthy societies, those two words can go together? And, ultimately that kind of scandal, that kind of uh, that counterintuitive quality is what I'm really hoping to convey to people who pick up this book, because Before I became a journalist, I have a background in anthropology. I have a PhD in cultural anthropology. And something that we as anthropologists love to say in introductory courses is that anthropology is about making the familiar strange, taking things that are just sort of status quo that we take for granted and making them seem a little bit bizarre. And nowhere, I think, is that more urgent than when it comes to housing. What we have done, what we have allowed to happen to housing in our societies, we've basically auctioned off this precious resource, this basic human necessity. We've just auctioned it off to the highest bidder. And we call it supply and demand economics. We call it capitalism. We don't call it by its proper name, which is really price gouging during an emergency that has not been declared, right?
Yes, it's so true. Yes.
And that is why we're seeing this sort of skyrocketing homelessness and this entire world of homelessness out of sight and all of these millions of people right on the verge of it. It's because of what we've allowed housing to become. Housing is at the source of it. And I remember during the pandemic, I don't know if you remember, but there were some cases of people hoarding hand sanitizer or hoarding masks and then putting them on eBay or Amazon and selling them for 80. And I remember thinking, that's what we've done to housing. We've allowed these investors, these corporations to buy up housing, to hoard this precious resource, and then just say, if you can afford what we are charging, which is way beyond what our costs are, way beyond the rate of inflation, if you can afford it, great. If you can't afford it, you're left to fend for yourself in what a case manager in the book, Carla Wells, what she refers to as the housing Hunger Games. You are left to fend for yourself on the housing Hunger Games. And I want us to ask, how did we allow this to happen?
I want us to ask that too. Like I said, Brian, I could talk to you I have 1,000 more questions because I find it so fascinating to talk about this with somebody who actually has written. I mean, it's everything in here. It is, I need everybody to read this book because this book is all of us. All of us are this book, and the stories in this book are real stories, and you will find yourself in these, in these people, not characters, in these people. You will find yourself in here because I like you, I believe that there is a very fine line between having a home and not having a home. And I find it very worrisome. And I see what's happening in my own city in Vancouver, where we think the answer is to build sky rises everywhere and expect people to want to live in 44 stories in a 600 square foot box with their entire family and be happy. And that's for $4,000 a month. And it's just not realistic. And it's not the answer. And so this book, there is no place for us, working and homeless in America. Brian, this book, you should be so proud. And I really do hope that everybody reads it. I'll be giving it to lots of friends as a gift because it is a true gift for all of us. I can't thank you enough. Your website is briangoldstone.net. Lots of information there. And Brian's book is available wherever you find your favorite books. Thank you so much, Brian, for this conversation.
This conversation has meant the world to me. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to another episode of TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Be sure to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for another conversation. You can also check out our website, telus.com/podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at TELUS Talks.